I'm able to contemplate the incredible privilege that He is calling me to be His bride. And so the answer to don't you want to get married is yes to Christ. And it's something that brings me a lot of joy to contemplate that.
In a world where vocation can take many forms, one path that has existed since the earliest days of Christianity is the vocation of consecrated virginity. This ancient and revered way of life calls a woman to dedicate herself entirely to Christ, living a life of perpetual virginity while remaining in the world. Today we explore the stories of two women, Wendy and Jenny, who have heard this profound call to this special vocation.
My name is Wendy. I'm a parishioner of the Basilica of Our Lady Immaculate here in Guelph. I would say that my great aunt Kay was one of my first and best teachers of the faith. When I was quite young, I enjoyed going to Mass with her. And she would teach me about the various things that were happening in the Mass. She taught me how to pray the Rosary, and I really enjoyed spending time with her before and after we would attend Mass together. She died when I was 14, which was very difficult for me, and I would say that I was back and forth in my practice of faith throughout most of high school, and then was away from my faith for what I thought was permanently around the time that I went off to university. In about my third year of school, something started to happen. I say now, looking back, the Holy Spirit was really working. It took me a while to realize what was going on, but really feeling called to want to be at Mass. And that was here at Our Lady, really feeling called to want to be at Mass. And one particular day, wanting to go to confession, which was something I hadn't done in a number of years. But when I took up that invitation and returned to Mass and returned to the sacraments, it really was the beginning of a really significant growth in my faith, for which I was very grateful. During that time, I discerned a call to traditional religious life, and when I was thinking about being a sister or a nun, it was really the spousal aspect of the vocation, being a bride of Christ, that really attracted me to thinking and praying about that particular vocation. It ended up that that was not the plan that God had for my life, and as the years passed, I sort of considered what my vocation might be, wondered about marriage, but there was a particular time where I settled on, I'm fairly sure that God is calling me to a holy single life in the world. And that was fine. So it was very surprising to me a number of years ago when marriage started to be a very recurring theme in my individual prayer life. And something that happened at the same time was that others observed that when I was speaking about Christ, I almost did so romantically. I didn't notice it at first. Others had to sort of repeat it back to me, and I would say, "What are you talking about?" And they would say, "I'm just telling you what you said." And I was speaking of Christ in that romantic and spousal language. So that was familiar to me from my discernment of traditional religious life, but I didn't understand what it could mean for my life now. I had heard of the vocation of consecrated virginity, but it was never something that I considered I might be called to. And so even when I was directly invited to consider whether I may be called to consecrated virginity, it didn't seem to fit. It was very surprising at first. I fought it a little bit, and then when I decided to just sort of be curious and say, what if this is what God wants me to do? That's when I was really able to enter discernment and enter the consideration of, is this what God is asking me to do? As I've continued my formation, of course, there is that beautiful spousal aspect, just really contemplating what it means to grow closer to the heart of Christ as his future spouse. But the other piece that has developed as I think and pray more about it is, what does that mean for the rest of my life? What does that mean for my life in the world? And what does that mean for the gifts that I am able to offer to others, the service that I am able to offer to Christ through serving others, my involvements here in my parish, in the music ministry, and in RCIA, and just in my day-to-day life, always having that question of, what can I bring to prayer, and how can I bring my life with Christ in prayer to my interactions with those that I encounter in my parish, in my work life, just in my day-to-day. And so as I've continued to grow in formation, it has become something that is all-encompassing. It's not just something that I think about at night in my own individual prayer life. It's something that when I'm praying in the morning, it's what is this going to look like in my day? What is this going to look like in all of the interactions that I'm able to have today? How is Christ going to put someone in my path and allow me to minister to them and allow me to share the gospel with them? And that is something that I find very precious, whether it is literally teaching someone about the gospel in RCIA, or whether that is just a kind or friendly interaction, or being able to see a need in someone and either acknowledge it or even help to meet it. And so in all these large and small ways, I believe that God is speaking to my heart and preparing me and continuing to form me in this vocation. And I have a lot of hope that this call is genuine and that I am called to be a bride of Christ. It is a really beautiful thought to contemplate.
For Wendy and Jenny, the journey toward consecration is a response to the love of Christ. But what exactly is consecrated virginity? Consecrated virginity is one of the oldest forms of consecrated life in the Catholic Church. Dating back to the time of the early Church, consecrated virgins have made a commitment to live in perfect chastity for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. Unlike nuns, they do not live in religious communities, but remain in the world, serving the Church and others through their prayers and lives of service. The rite of consecration is a solemn act performed by a bishop who declares that the woman is forever consecrated to Christ. In this special rite, the woman is presented before the bishop, who asks God to pour out his blessings upon her, making her a bride of Christ. After receiving the veil and ring, symbols of her mystical marriage to Christ, the newly consecrated virgin is sent forth into the world, where she will live out her unique vocation.
My name is Jenny. I live in Guelph, and my parish is the Basilica of Our Lady Immaculate in Guelph. I was born in Uxbridge, Ontario, which is kind of north of Toronto, northwest, I guess. Kind of grew up in like a rural area. My mom had me when she was pretty young, so I was unexpected, but I think there was, had some support. She had some support. My mom believed in God, but we didn't go to church, didn't have much of a religious upbringing. Once in a while, my grandma and I would pray and just usually be like just a list of family members, things like that. And so I think my first kind of memorable introduction to faith was probably Thanksgiving. We would kind of just pray before we ate. And then I went to, there was a homeschooling family, and I would go over to their house after school when I was in grade 1 and spend time with them when my mom was at work. And so I would spend time with them, and their oldest daughter I looked up to. She was in grade 8 and I was in grade 1, and she started talking to me about Jesus, and she would talk about heaven and kind of like just like basic things about what Christians believed. And she said, like, do you want to become a Christian? And I said, sure, yeah. And I just said a prayer after her, and from that time on I kind of saw myself as a Christian. And in my limited understanding, I just thought a Christian was someone that believed in heaven and believed that Jesus existed, and that was it. And so from that time on, I just kind of, moved on with life. I didn't really spend time in prayer. We didn't pray as a family. When I was 3, my mom met who would become my dad, and when I was 8, they got married, and we all lived together, and he adopted me. And I think growing up in elementary school, I was just really searching for my identity, like what it was. I would just try different things. I kind of discovered I'm not very good at sports, not very coordinated. People in my family tend not to be very coordinated, not particularly good at the arts, not particularly gifted at academics. I had some friends, but I wasn't really a social butterfly. I like to spend time alone, really. And so I would just try different things, and I found, like, what do I excel at? What can I place my identity on? And I would ask my mom, like, what am I good at? And I wanted to be good at something like math or something, because I thought that's what's important, like something really practical that I can be good at and excel at. And she would say, well, you know right from wrong, and you're kind. And so, like, that's what you're good at. And I'm like, okay, well. So, I would keep coming back to this. And I think at the time, if someone asked me, like, are you happy? I would have said yes. I had good parents, good friends. Things were okay, but I think looking back, there was definitely something missing, and I would say that would be faith. And I asked my parents one day when we were driving past a church in the car, like, why don't we go to church? Can we start going? And they're kind of like, okay, like, that's not something that necessarily they would have wanted to do, but they're like, okay, for you, like, we'll do that. And so we started going to the Presbyterian church, kind of near where we lived. And I just found I really enjoyed, like, the singing, like the kind of praise of God, and listening to the messages. And I was just like seeking something. And I had the opportunity to go to camp, to go to Christian summer camp in grades 7 and 8. And I just met other people, girls that were going to church regularly and, like, talking about their faith and really feeling like they have something that I want. And just feeling that sense of, I think God, like, the whole time was just wanting a relationship with me and kind of inviting me through my desire of feeling like something's missing. After a period of time of really discerning by going to religious orders and also just growing in my prayer life, really, when I was at university, I started going to adoration once a week. And at first I was kind of like, what is this about? What should I be doing? But then over time, it just kind of fell into a place. It was just like, well, I'm going there to be with Jesus. And so sometimes I would just sit there and I wouldn't really do anything. Other times I would pray imaginatively. I would have something kind of planned. Either way, I just kind of got into this routine of once a week, it's kind of this time to be with Jesus. And so through this experience of meeting different people, growing in my prayer life, kind of discerning by trying things, talking to my spiritual director, I stumbled upon this blog, and I had this experience of, it just kind of hit me like, I think this is it. Like, and it was like Jesus was really asking me, like, would you be my bride without living in a religious community? Because at the time I thought that was important to me. Like, I wanted to be in a religious community to be with other people, but I had a sense of, like, would you be my bride without that? And I just had a sense of kind of awe that he would ask me, and a sense of more clarity and more confidence that this was what God was asking of me. And so kind of from that time of regularly meeting with my spiritual director, growing in prayer, I just had a sense of feeling like I'm becoming more myself, in a sense. Feeling like I'm there's a sense of being alone with Christ in the world that I've become more and more comfortable with. A sense of needing that space to just have this relationship, and then have that be opened up so that I'm participating in his mission of salvation of souls by praying for people, but also just in my daily interactions at work. I work at the St. Vincent de Paul thrift store in Guelph, and just having a sense of kind of every moment of my life is about growing in my relationship with God and living out his mission with him and supporting him in it, of helping other people along on the journey. And just having an overall sense of a growing joy, a growing fulfillment in life, having a sense of appreciation of, I would say, even smaller things, and just feeling that meeting God in little things and experiencing the kingdom of God now. Just a small thing is, I didn't used to drink coffee, but kind of discovering coffee and having an appreciation for it, or discovering a love of reading or writing, or joining a book club, just like little things that, I don't know, it's like, it seems unrelated, but it's like by being in relationship with Christ, it has enhanced other things in my life, that it's just become more fruitful, and more joyful, that everything is grounded in him. And in a sense, knowing why I'm here, knowing what my identity is. Yeah, and so I have been in formation for 5 years. We take theological classes with the deacon candidates and their wives once a month for 4 years, and then in the 5th year we meet with Bishop Lobsinger, who's in charge of our formation, and we go over the rite in preparation for being consecrated. Yeah, and just having a sense of encountering God in my workplace as well, and having a sense of finding that God is already involved in the things that I'm involved in, and just acknowledging kind of that he's already there. We're already working together in my job and in every area of my life.
Although they live in the world, consecrated virgins are not alone in their vocation. They are part of the Church, and their lives of prayer, sacrifice, and charity reflect the love of Christ to everyone they encounter. Whether in their professional work, their involvement in the Church, or in their personal lives, they are called to be witnesses of Christ's love in a unique and powerful way.
So there was a thing that I noticed that started to happen about the time that I entered my 30s, and that was other people became very, very interested in what I was going to do with my life, and would come to me and ask, well, don't you want to get married? Aren't you going to get married? And in my early 30s, I was still very much hoping that I was called to traditional marriage. And so when someone would say, well, don't you want to get married? My answer would be something like, well, yeah, as soon as God brings my husband around, that's the plan. You know, I can't wait to see who he has for me. And then as the years progressed, I sort of got more comfortable with the idea that maybe God was calling me to a holy single life in the world. So when people would ask, well, aren't you going to get married? I would say, no, I don't think that's what God is calling me to. And people really couldn't get their heads around that. What do you mean? And now that I'm discerning consecrated virginity, and now that the character of the vocation is nuptial, it is spousal, a consecrated virgin is the bride of Christ, and now that I'm contemplating that vocation, when somebody says to me, well, don't you want to get married? First of all, the answer is yes, and I'm going to Jesus. And that is so beautiful that when someone comes with their next question and says, no, but I mean a traditional marriage. Don't you want to get married to a human man? And the answer is no, because I have everything that I need when I go to prayer and deeply, deeply contemplate the heart of Christ, or when I attend Mass here and contemplate His complete sacrifice for me and receive Him in the Eucharist, body and blood, soul and divinity, I have everything that I need, and I'm able to contemplate the incredible privilege that He is calling me to be His bride. And so the answer to don't you want to get married is yes, to Christ. And it's something that brings me a lot of joy to contemplate that.
As a diocesan priest, when I reflect upon the vocation of consecrated virginity lived in the world, I have to admit in all humility, we're all called to holiness, but sometimes, even though priests should be good and holy, there have been scandals. Sometimes priests aren't always good and holy. I think that the vocation to consecrated virginity, the women who are being called now, help us really believe that the church is still holy, even when our priests let us down. These women are imaging the church. Their growth in holiness reminds us the church is also Mary and the saints in heaven and all the saints on earth, and that we truly can believe in a holy Catholic Church.
Father Mark Morley, Vocations Director for the Diocese of Hamilton, gives his insight.
I'm Father Mark Morley. I'm the Vocations Director for the Diocese of Hamilton, and it's my privilege to foster all vocations, and in particular this time I want to talk about the vocation of consecrated virginity lived in the world. I consider it to be one of the three diocesan nuptial vocations. We think of the nuptial vocations as all three of them sharing in the form of Christ being the bridegroom espoused to his bride, the church. And so, of course, we readily think of marriage, the man standing in the place of Christ, the woman in the place of his bride, Christ's bride, the church, coming together, loving each other unconditionally with the love that Christ has for the church. But what you may not have considered is that both diocesan priesthood and consecrated virginity complement each other in that nuptial form as well, with the priest, the diocesan priest, standing in the place of Christ, laying down his life for Christ's bride, the church. There's a certain sense that the diocesan priest could be spoken of as espoused to the church, serving his community, laying down his life for her. Some diocesan priests even wear a wedding band to symbolize that. Consecrated virginity lived in the world. The woman images, the consecrated virgin images Christ's bride, the church. So in the ceremony of consecration, she is espoused to Christ, her bride, and it has all the same symbolism of a wedding ceremony, where not only does she wear a ring, but she wears a wedding dress and a veil. And so I would like to talk a little bit more about how I see diocesan priesthood and consecrated virginity complementing each other as diocesan nuptial vocations. First of all, I'd like to mention that for me personally, as I've come to know the vocation better and accompanying women who are in formation to be consecrated, I've come to understand my priesthood at a deeper level as well. So, for example, celibacy required of both diocesan priests and consecrated virgins. When it comes to the priesthood and in vocations promotion, I'm promoting vocations to the priesthood, but typically when people talk about celibacy, it's kind of put in terms of the utility of it. You know, the celibate priest, the parish priest, he's more available. He doesn't have a wife and a family to care for, so he can be available to care for his parish family, which is absolutely true. However, when it comes to consecrated virginity, it's more of a vocation of being rather than doing. And so the celibacy doesn't have that kind of utility or pragmatic value to it. It doesn't necessarily make the woman more available to do service, although it could be that, but that's not what it's about. And so when I think about consecrated virgins embracing celibacy, perpetual virginity, for the sake of the kingdom, then that helps me reflect upon how, yes, okay, there is a pragmatic usefulness about being a celibate priest, but at a deeper level, I also live celibacy as a sign of the kingdom to come, this eschatological sign of waiting for Christ to come. Now, different for the consecrated virgin because she's waiting for the return of her bridegroom, Christ, the bridegroom. His return is the second coming. We're all waiting for Christ to return. And so in that place of Christ as the diocesan priest, celibacy takes on a deeper meaning when I understand and reflect upon the celibacy of consecrated virgins. Another consideration when it comes to the diocesan nuptial vocations, marriage, consecrated virginity, and priesthood, is to think about how the bishop, for the diocesan priest, we are sons of the bishop. The bishop is our father, priests are sons of the bishop, and in a complementary way, consecrated virgins are his daughters. And so within the diocesan family, we have the bishop, his sons, the priests, and his daughters, the consecrated virgins. And I think that it is fitting that the vocation of consecrated virginity is coming back in a way now, because in the early church, there was a sense that we could say, in a manner of speaking, living in a more pagan world, a more secular world. The church is more in that place now of, at least here in Canada, in our diocese, we're living more and more in a kind of a secular world. And it's fitting that we have consecrated virgins living in the world. It's good that we have religious sisters, but at the same time, this vocation of consecrated virginity lived in the world again complements the secular priest, the diocesan priest, who also in a sense is living the world as opposed to being a religious vocation. As Diocesan Vocations Director, I'm promoting all vocations: marriage, priesthood, consecrated virginity, religious life. And I do want people to know that if a woman is interested in consecrated virginity, that she can approach me. I can then put her in touch with a consecrated virgin or a consecrated candidate for consecrated virginity. I could also arrange for her to speak to the bishop at some point as well. As Vocations Director for the diocese, we have these prayer cards for our seminarians, our candidates for the permanent diaconate, our candidates for consecrated virginity. And we also include women who are in formation to be religious sisters on those prayer cards. And I know that sometimes when people look at the card, they might think, oh, the consecrated virgins, that it's religious life, that maybe they live together in a community. Well, they don't. And in fact, the vocation predates religious life. In the early centuries of the church, women took up this call to be invited to be spouses of Christ. Many of the early church virgin martyrs are known to people. But eventually, when they started living together in community, they became kind of the beginning of religious life for women, was communities of consecrated virgins living together. But the big difference between religious life and consecrated virginity is the way of consecration. Religious sisters consecrate themselves by taking vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, whereas consecrated virgins are consecrated by the bishop. He lays his hands over them, calls the Holy Spirit down upon them, and so they're consecrated by the bishop without taking vows. And this is a very permanent commitment, you know. Vows can be dispensed from. A woman cannot be dispensed from being consecrated after she's consecrated from the bishop. And I think this is one of the reasons why in our diocese the bishop has preferred that women wait until they're a little bit older to be consecrated. And formation usually starts around 25. Have to be at least 25 before starting the formation, which is about 5 years. I think that's the major difference. They both, religious women and consecrated virgins, live celibacy, but they make that commitment to celibacy differently.
As we conclude our journey exploring the sacred vocation of consecrated virginity lived in the world today, we are reminded of the profound beauty and commitment this calling represents. Wendy and Jenny, as candidates discerning this path, have shared their heartfelt reflections, revealing the deep love and courage required to dedicate their lives fully to Christ as their eternal spouse. Through their witness, we glimpse the richness of this unique vocation in today's world. Father Mark Morley, Vocations Director for the Diocese of Hamilton, has illuminated the Church's continued support and guidance for those called to this life. His insights remind us that the vocation of consecrated virginity is a sign of hope and a testament to the enduring relevance of Christ's call to holiness in every age. This vocation, deeply rooted in the tradition of the Church, is not simply a personal commitment. It is a witness to the world of God's love and faithfulness. It reminds us all of the infinite ways we are called to respond to His grace in our lives. Thank you for joining us as we explored this profound expression of faith and devotion. My name is Daniel, here at the Basilica of Our Lady Immaculate, and may what we have experienced today inspire us to reflect on our own unique callings and the ways we too can bring Christ's love into the world.